Dr. Thomas Weber's drill bit struck something unusual at 1,273 meters below the Antarctic ice sheet. The resistance wasn't the typical rock or sediment he'd encountered countless times before during his geological surveys. This felt different, almost metallic. "Kill the drill," he shouted into his radio, his breath fogging inside his protective mask. The massive drilling apparatus ground to a halt, its whine dying in the perpetual Antarctic wind. "Something's not right here." The research station's drilling team quickly retrieved the core sample, and Thomas's suspicions were confirmed. Embedded within the ancient ice was something that shouldn't be there, a faint bluish shimmer that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "Get the spectrometer," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. As the team's lead geologist, he'd seen plenty of strange formations, but nothing like this. The preliminary readings only deepened the mystery. The material wasn't registering as any known element. Within hours, the discovery had transformed their modest research station into a hive of activity. Additional equipment was flown in, and as they carefully excavated around the anomaly, its true nature began to emerge. It wasn't just a strange material, it was a pod, roughly human-sized, and inside. "It's impossible," Dr. Renata Kovac, their team's medical expert, whispered as she studied the scanning results. "The pod contains a humanoid figure, perfectly preserved. But look at these readings, the cellular structure, the bone density, whatever's in there isn't human." Thomas stood before the hollowed-out ice cave, staring at the now fully exposed pod. Its surface was smooth, almost liquid-looking, despite being solid to the touch. The figure inside was clearly feminine, with silvery skin and delicate features that seemed both alien and beautiful. Her expression was peaceful, as if she were merely sleeping. That night, in his cramped quarters, Thomas dreamed. He saw her eyes open, iridescent pools of violet that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She spoke to him in a language he'd never heard, yet somehow understood. "Timekeeper," she said, her voice resonating in his mind. "I have waited so long for you." He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The dream had felt impossibly real, and as he rushed to the excavation site, he could have sworn the pod's surface rippled at his approach. The next few days were a blur of activity. More specialists arrived, along with government officials and military personnel. Everyone wanted to study the pod, but all attempts to open it failed. The material resisted every tool and technique they tried. "The cellular decay rate suggests she's been here for at least 20,000 years, Renata explained during one of their briefings. "But that's impossible. The preservation is perfect, and look at this technology, it's far beyond anything we can create today." Thomas found himself spending more and more time in the ice cave, studying the pod and its occupant. The dreams continued each night, becoming more vivid and detailed. She told him of worlds beyond imagination, of civilizations that had risen and fallen among the stars. And always, she spoke of waiting specifically for him. One evening, as the perpetual Antarctic sun hung low on the horizon, Thomas noticed something different. The pod's surface had begun to emit a soft humming sound, and its color was shifting subtly. "Everyone out," he ordered, but he himself remained, drawn forward by an inexplicable certainty. The humming grew louder, and the pod's surface began to ripple like liquid mercury. As the last of his team cleared the cave, Thomas reached out and touched the pod's surface. It felt warm now, almost alive under his fingers. The dreams hadn't been dreams at all, they had been messages. "Welcome, Timekeeper," a voice echoed in his mind, and this time, he wasn't asleep. The pod's surface began to dissolve, and for the first time in 20 millennia, the woman inside opened her eyes. Those violet galaxies fixed upon him, and Thomas knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same. She smiled, and the cave filled with a soft, otherworldly light. "I am Valera," she said, her voice just as he remembered from his dreams. "And I have crossed time itself to find you." The medical bay erupted into chaos as Valera took her first steps in the modern world. Her silvery skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh fluorescent lights, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room flickered in response to her presence. Dr. Renata Kovac frantically tried to maintain some semblance of medical protocol, but how does one conduct a standard examination on a being who defies all known biology? Your monitoring devices won't be necessary, Valera said, her voice carrying an otherworldly melody that made everyone in the room stop and listen. My stasis pod has maintained my body in perfect condition. She turned to Thomas, who stood transfixed by the doorway. Though I must admit, speaking through dreams was far less disorienting than this physical form. The military personnel stationed outside the medical bay burst in, weapons raised, but Valera merely smiled. With a gentle wave of her hand, their guns transformed into what appeared to be flowers, beautiful, metallic blooms that left the soldiers staring in bewilderment. I mean no harm, she assured them, but I won't allow any threats in Thomas's presence. The way she said his name carried centuries of familiarity, as if she'd known him all her life. Over the next few hours, as government officials scrambled to contain the situation, Valera began to share her story. She came from a civilization that had mastered both space and time, one that had visited Earth during its earliest days of human development. We were observers, primarily, she explained to Thomas as they sat in a hastily arranged debriefing room. But we saw something in humanity's future, something that required intervention. More specifically, we saw you, Thomas. The scientists and officials present exchanged skeptical glances, but Thomas felt the truth of her words resonating within him. The dreams they'd shared had left an indelible mark on his consciousness. Our scientists discovered a convergence point in Earth's timeline, Valera continued. A moment when the right person, with the right knowledge, could change everything. They found you, Thomas, but you weren't born yet. So I volunteered to wait. For 20,000 years. Renata interrupted, her scientific mind struggling with the concept. The technological implications alone are dash. Time flows differently in stasis, Valera explained patiently. For me, it was like a long dream, filled with visions of what would come. I watched humanity grow, advance, stumble, and rise again. I watched you grow up, Thomas, through the lens of time itself. As she spoke, her silvery skin began to shift, taking on a more human-like appearance. My body can adapt to better suit this environment, she explained, noting their amazement. Though I chose to maintain some aspects of my natural form. Her violet eyes, still swirling with galaxies, fixed upon Thomas. The government officials began their interrogation in earnest then, pressing for details about her technology, her civilization's capabilities, and their intentions for Earth. But Valera remained focused on Thomas, their connection palpable in the room. There will be time for all of that, she assured them. But first, Thomas and I have much to discuss. Privately. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Thomas found himself defending her request. She's right, he said, standing. She's already demonstrated she means no harm, and she's here specifically to help us. We should trust her judgment. The officials reluctantly agreed to a private meeting, though they insisted on monitoring from outside. As the room cleared, Valera approached Thomas, her movement graceful and otherworldly. The dreams we shared were just the beginning, she said softly. There's so much more I need to show you, to teach you. Our connection isn't just about the future of humanity, it's about us, about patterns that echo across time and space. She reached out and touched his hand, and in that moment, Thomas's world exploded into visions. He saw distant worlds, advanced civilizations, and patterns of time that stretched like delicate webs across the universe. But most importantly, he saw them, himself and Valera, their souls dancing through different lives, different times, always finding each other. In every possible timeline, she whispered, we find each other. But this timeline, this moment, is the most crucial. What we do here will echo across the centuries to come. As the visions faded, Thomas found himself gripping Valera's hand tightly. The connection between them had grown stronger, more tangible. He could feel the weight of time and destiny pressing in around them, but also the rightness of it all. "I have so many questions," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Valera smiled, the expression lighting up her entire being. "And I have waited millennia to answer them. But first, you should know, the reason I chose this moment, this time, to awaken. Something is coming, Thomas. Something that humanity needs to be prepared for. And you and I, together, are the key to that preparation." "You're telling me you've never had ice cream?" Thomas asked, watching Valera's expression with amusement as they sat in his apartment's small kitchen. 3 weeks had passed since her awakening, and after endless debriefings, the government had reluctantly agreed to let her live under Thomas's supervision. Valera studied the bowl before her with the same intensity she'd shown when examining quantum physics texts. "We had similar molecular gastronomy in my time, but nothing quite like this." She took a careful spoonful, and her violet eyes widened with delight. The temperature sensation combined with the sweetness, fascinating. Thomas couldn't help but smile. Despite her vast knowledge and incredible powers, Valera approached every new experience with childlike wonder. She had spent the past weeks absorbing modern culture with remarkable speed, though some concepts still puzzled her. "Your civilization's obsession with digital social networks is particularly intriguing," she noted, reaching for another spoonful. "You seek connection through screens while often avoiding direct contact with those physically near you." Their domestic moment was interrupted by a call from Dr. Kovac. The research team had been working overtime trying to understand the technology from Valera's stasis pod. "Thomas, you both need to come in. We've found something concerning." At the facility, Renata led them to the lab where the pod was being studied. "The energy signature from the pod has been increasing exponentially," she explained, pointing to a series of readings. "It's as if it's responding to something we can't detect." Valera's expression grew serious. "It's earlier than I expected," she murmured, placing her hand on the pod's surface. The entire device lit up at her touch, projecting a holographic display of the solar system. "The signal has already begun." "What signal?" Thomas asked, though part of him already knew. Their connection had grown stronger over the weeks, and sometimes he caught glimpses of her thoughts, her memories. "The reason I'm here," Valera replied, manipulating the hologram to zoom in on a point beyond Neptune's orbit. "In approximately 18 months, your solar system will receive its first visitor. The one my people foresaw." The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. Renata was the first to speak. "Are you saying we're about to have first contact with another alien species?" "Not exactly," Valera said, her voice grave. "What's coming isn't a visitor. It's a warning. A harbinger of something far more significant." She turned to Thomas, taking his hand. "This is why the convergence point centers on you. Your understanding of Earth's geological history, combined with my knowledge, is crucial for what's coming." Later that evening, as they walked through a quiet park under the stars, Thomas processed everything Valera had revealed. The approaching object would trigger a chain of events that could reshape Earth's climate within decades. Without proper preparation, the changes would be catastrophic. "I still don't understand why it had to be me," Thomas admitted, watching Valera as she gazed up at the constellations. In the moonlight, her silvery skin had a pearl-like sheen, and her now shoulder-length hair shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. "Because you see patterns others miss," she replied, turning to face him. "Your research on Earth's previous climate shifts already put you on the right path. But more than that." She stepped closer, and Thomas felt that familiar resonance between them strengthen. "Our connection allows me to share knowledge that would take decades to explain otherwise." Their work at the facility had proven this true. When they worked together, Thomas could intuitively understand concepts that should have been centuries beyond current human comprehension. Their minds seemed to synchronize, especially when dealing with complex problems. "There's something else you should know," Valera said softly. The changes coming to Earth, they're not just physical. The presence of the Harbinger will begin to awaken certain dormant capabilities in humans. Some will handle it better than others. Like our connection? Thomas asked. The way we can share thoughts and memories. Valera nodded. My people once guided humanity's early development. We saw the potential for humans to evolve beyond their physical limitations. That potential is about to accelerate, ready or not. A group of late-night joggers passed by, doing double takes at Valera's ethereal appearance. She had gotten used to such reactions, even seemed amused by them. Despite her attempts to look more human, there was no hiding her otherworldly nature. Tomorrow, we need to present our findings to the UN committee, Thomas reminded her. Are you sure we can convince them? We have to, Valera replied, her expression determined. But first. She pulled him toward a small ice cream cart that was closing for the night. I believe I need more practice with your Earth cuisines. For diplomatic purposes, of course. Thomas laughed, and for a moment, the weight of their mission lifted. As he watched Valera charm the vendor into one last sale, he realized that despite the monumental tasks ahead of them, despite the fate of the world literally hanging in the balance, he had never felt more complete, more purposeful. The stars twinkled above them, holding secrets of what was to come, but right now, in this moment, they were just a man and a woman enjoying ice cream in the park. Even if one of them was a time-traveling alien with galaxy-filled eyes. The UN Assembly Hall buzzed with tension as Thomas and Valera presented their findings. On the massive screens behind them, simulations showed the approaching Harbinger's potential impact on Earth's magnetic field. The object, now detected by multiple observatories, was unlike anything in recorded astronomy. The crystalline structure of this object, Valera explained, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, will create a resonance with Earth's core. Think of it as a tuning fork for planetary frequencies. She gestured, and the holographic display transformed into a mesmerizing pattern of intersecting energy waves. Within 6 months of its closest approach, Thomas continued, we'll see the first effects. Increased seismic activity, atmospheric irregularities, and most significantly, changes in human consciousness. A murmur rippled through the assembled leaders. The Russian representative stood first. Changes in consciousness? Are you suggesting some form of mind control? Not control, Valera corrected, her violet eyes scanning the crowd. Awakening. Your species has been in a form of developmental stasis, much like I was in that ice. The Harbinger's energy signature will act as a catalyst for dormant abilities. Thomas stepped forward, sensing the growing skepticism. We've already documented early cases. The incident in Stockholm last week, the child who predicted the earthquake hours before it happened. The sudden increase in reported telepathic experiences worldwide. These aren't coincidences. Later that evening, in their secure apartment provided by the UN, Thomas found Valera standing by the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. They're afraid, she said without turning. I can feel their fear warring with their curiosity. Can you blame them? Thomas moved to stand beside her. You're telling them that humanity is about to undergo an evolutionary leap, ready or not. Valera turned to him then, and in her eyes, he saw the weight of millennia. There's something I haven't told you, Thomas. Something I've carried alone through 20,000 years of dreams. She led him to the center of the room and placed her hands on either side of his face. The contact sent sparkles of energy through his consciousness, and suddenly they weren't in the apartment anymore. They stood on a vast plain under 3 moons, surrounded by structures that defied physics. This was my home, Valera's voice echoed in his mind. Before we discovered what was coming to Earth, before we found you in the timeline. The scene shifted, showing him a civilization at its peak, masters of energy in consciousness. He saw how they discovered the Harbinger's approach, how they calculated its effects across multiple timelines. But most importantly, he saw why they chose Earth. Your people, Thomas gasped as understanding flooded him. They didn't just visit Earth to study humans. They were preparing humanity for something. Yes, Valera confirmed as the vision faded, leaving them back in their apartment. My civilization didn't end, it evolved beyond physical form. The Harbinger isn't just going to change humanity, it's going to prepare you for contact with beings that exist in dimensions your science hasn't even discovered yet. Thomas sat heavily on their couch, his mind reeling. The dreams we shared while you were in stasis, the way our consciousness connects, you've been preparing me specifically for this, haven't you? Valera knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. You were chosen across all possible timelines, Thomas. Your mind, your spirit, they're uniquely suited to bridge the gap between what humanity is and what it must become. And us? He asked softly. This connection between us, was that engineered too? A smile played at her lips, and her form shimmed slightly with emotion. That was the one variable my people couldn't predict. In every timeline where we succeeded, where humanity made the transition safely, there was one constant: we fell in love. Not because we were meant to, but because our souls recognized each other across the vastness of time and space. She stood, pulling him up with her. Come with me. There's something else you need to see. They took the elevator to the building's roof garden. Under the starlit sky, Valera retrieved a small crystal from around her neck, a piece of her stasis pod she'd kept. My people left more than just me to help Earth, she explained, holding the crystal up. It caught the starlight and began to pulse with an inner glow. There are installations, hidden around your planet, waiting to be activated. Technology that will help stabilize the changes to come. But they need both of us to awaken them, your connection to Earth's current biosphere, and my knowledge of how to use them. As if in response to her words, the crystal projected a map showing points of light across the globe, each one a hidden installation waiting to be discovered. How long do we have? Thomas asked, already calculating distances and logistics in his head. 3 months to find and activate the first installation, Valera replied. The Harbinger's influence will reach critical levels by then. She turned to him, her expression both loving and serious. Are you ready for this? Once we begin, there's no turning back. The Thomas Weber who stands here now will transform along with the rest of humanity. In response, Thomas pulled her close and kissed her. The contact sent shivers of energy through both of them, and for a moment, their consciousness merged completely. In that fusion, he saw everything, the past, the present, and the myriad possibilities of the future. I've been ready since you first spoke to me in my dreams, he whispered against her lips. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, not a star at all, but the Harbinger, growing brighter with each passing night, carrying with it the promise of humanity's next great leap forward. The ancient installation thrummed to life beneath the Icelandic glacier, its crystalline architecture pulsing with awakened energy. Thomas and Valera stood at its center, their hands joined as they guided the power flowing through the ancient machinery. This was the last of 7 sites they'd activated around the globe, each one strengthening Earth's protective field against the approaching Harbinger's influence. The resonance patterns are stabilizing, Valera announced, her silver skin luminescent in the crystal-reflected light. After 3 months of working with the ancient technology, Thomas had learned to see what she saw, the intricate web of energy now enveloping the planet, visible to their enhanced perception. Look, Thomas pointed to the holographic display showing the Harbinger's approach. The energy signature is already changing. The massive crystalline object, now visible to the naked eye in the night sky, had begun to pulse in sync with their activated network. Their success had come at a cost. The world was in the midst of unprecedented change as humanity began to awaken to new abilities. Some welcomed the transformation, while others fought against it. Governments struggled to maintain order as more people developed telepathic abilities, precognitive dreams, and other phenomena that defied traditional science. Dr. Weber, Ms. Valera, their communication device crackled with Dr. Kovac's voice. The UN Security Council is requesting your presence. The Russian president's daughter has begun showing signs of evolution. During their journey to New York, Thomas and Valera watched the sunrise from their hypersonic transport. The sky held new colors now, subtle auroras visible even in daylight, a side effect of the Harbinger's approach. Do you remember the first time we saw a sunrise together? Thomas asked, taking Valera's hand. Her touch sent familiar ripples of energy through their shared consciousness. In Antarctica, she smiled, her galaxy-filled eyes reflecting the dawn. Though technically, I'd watched thousands of sunrises through the ice. But that was the first one I saw with you. Their arrival at UN headquarters was met with a mixture of reverence and fear. Over the past months, as more people had begun to develop abilities, Thomas and Valera had become symbols of humanity's potential future. Their public connection, both romantic and metaphysical, offered hope that humanity could adapt to its coming evolution while maintaining its essential nature. The Security Council chamber was packed with world leaders, many attending virtually through new holographic systems developed using Valera's knowledge. The Russian president's daughter, Natasha, sat in the center, a gentle glow emanating from her skin, much like Valera's. She's a bridge, Valera explained, approaching the frightened teenager. Like Thomas, she's one of the few humans naturally suited to handle the transition. Her abilities are manifesting early because she'll help others through their awakening. Thomas joined them, extending his consciousness the way Valera had taught him. He could sense the girl's confusion and fear, but also her strength. You're not alone, he assured her. What you're experiencing, it's humanity's next step. We're here to help you understand it. The Harbinger's influence had grown stronger each day. More children were being born with advanced abilities, and adults worldwide reported increasing instances of telepathic connection. The installations they'd activated helped regulate these changes, preventing the mass chaos Valera's people had foreseen in failed timelines. The harbor approaches its critical point, Valera announced to the assembly. In 72 hours, it will reach its optimal position. We must be ready. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Thomas and Valera worked tirelessly, connecting with other emerging sensitives like Natasha, creating a network of consciousness that would help stabilize humanity during the Harbinger's peak influence. On the final night, they stood on the roof of the UN building, surrounded by a group of the newly awakened. The Harbinger filled the sky now, its crystalline structure refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. It's time, Valera said softly, turning to Thomas. Are you ready? Thomas looked at the woman he'd fallen in love with across time itself, then at the gathered humans whose consciousness now brushed against his own with familiar warmth. We're ready. They joined hands, forming a circle. Valera began to glow, her true form shining through her human appearance. Thomas felt their consciousness merge completely, becoming a bridge between Valera's ancient knowledge and humanity's awakening potential. The Harbinger pulsed once, twice, and then released a wave of energy that washed over the planet. Through their connected consciousness, they helped guide and stabilize the change, preventing the chaos that might have been. As the energy settled, Thomas opened his eyes to a new world. Colors he'd never seen before painted the sky. The thoughts and emotions of others sang in his mind like distant music. And beside him, Valera shimmered with joy. This is only the beginning, she said, pulling him close. My people will make contact soon, now that humanity has taken its first steps into a larger universe. And us? Thomas asked, though he could already feel her answer in their shared consciousness. We have all of time, she smiled, her galaxy eyes swirling with possibility. And now, so does humanity. Around the world, people looked up at the crystal Harbinger with new eyes, their consciousness expanding, their potential unlocking. The great leap forward had begun, guided by a love that had waited 20,000 years to bloom. In Antarctica, the ice cave where it all began still held echoes of their story. And in the heart of the glacier, Valera's stasis pod continued to pulse faintly, a reminder that some loves are written in the stars, destined to change not just two lives, but the fate of an entire species. Thomas and Valera stood together at the dawn of humanity's new age, their hands clasped, their souls intertwined. They were no longer just two beings who had found each other across time, they were the bridge between what humanity had been and what it would become. And in every timeline, in every possibility, their love remained the constant that made it all possible.